Welcome, dear dreamer, to Whispers of the Night, a quiet corner where stories and dreams intertwine, carrying you gently into rest. Tonight, I invite you to slow down, breathe deeply, and let the world soften around you. Before we begin, I kindly ask you to subscribe to Whispers of the Night so you never miss a bedtime story made just for your peace and comfort. Your support helps keep these whispers alive night after night. So settle in, let your body grow heavy, and your thoughts drift like clouds across the twilight sky. Tonight's story will guide you into calm and carry you softly toward sleep. Our story tonight is set in a timeless cottage, hidden deep within the forest, where the seasons themselves seem to rest and breathe. Within its walls lives a boy named Adrian, gentle and curious, who carries the task of tending to the rhythm of nature. By his side drifts Vespera, a luminous figure, guiding him with quiet wisdom. As the evening deepens, the cottage becomes more than a home. It becomes a heartbeat of earth and sky, a bridge between the fleeting and the eternal. Tonight, we follow Adrian as he discovers his role as keeper of the seasons, where every bloom, every snowflake, and every turning leaf finds its place in the great, unbroken cycle of time. Let the imagery surround you. Let the whispers of twilight wrap around your thoughts, and allow yourself to drift as Adrian's journey begins. Before our story fully unfolds, let us take a few moments to prepare for sleep. Find a comfortable position, lying back or sitting in a way that allows your body to rest. Slowly close your eyes and take a long, gentle breath in and out. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the calm rhythm of your breath guiding you toward peace. With each inhale, imagine you are breathing in the cool air of the forest at twilight, the scent of damp earth, blooming flowers, and the faint sweetness of rain drift into your lungs. With each exhale, feel tension leaving your body, melting away like mist, fading into the night. Now, bring your awareness to your toes. Feel them relax, then your feet, soft and heavy against the surface beneath you. Let the calm move slowly upward into your legs, your hips, and your stomach. With each breath, your body grows heavier, sinking deeper into rest. Your chest softens, your shoulders release their weight, and even the muscles of your neck and jaw loosen, no longer holding on. Let your arms grow heavy, your hands loose and still, resting peacefully. Finally, your face relaxes, your eyes soft behind closed lids, your forehead smooth and calm. With your body at ease, imagine yourself stepping into the garden of the cottage. The air is cool, silvered with moonlight. Fireflies drift lazily among the flowers. The ground beneath you is soft. The air carries a faint shimmer of magic. You walk slowly, unhurried, as if time itself is pausing just for you. Ahead, A small attic window glows faintly, and you feel drawn to it. As you move closer, the heartbeat of the cottage begins to match your own, steady and calm. Each step brings you deeper into serenity until you feel entirely safe, entirely at peace, ready to drift into dreams. The cottage where seasons slept. The autumn doorway. Adrian had always been drawn to the quiet corners of the world. The places where the wind whispered through the trees and the sunlight fell in slanted, golden bands. That particular afternoon, the forest seemed to hum with an almost conscious awareness, each leaf trembling as if it were aware of his presence. He wandered further than usual, following the soft crunch of amber leaves beneath his boots, their edges crisp with the early touch of frost. The air was cool and smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, mingled with a sweetness that reminded him of decaying apples from long-forgotten orchards. The forest had a rhythm to it, a heartbeat hidden beneath the rustling branches, and Adrian felt himself tuning into it, as if every step he took was part of an unspoken conversation with the world around him. It was there, deep within a hollow, where the trees leaned together like old friends, sharing secrets, that he saw it, the cottage. At first, it seemed to be nothing more than a trick of the light, a silhouette of dark wood set against the flickering gold of autumn leaves. Its roof sagged gently, uneven in places, and vines had claimed sections of the walls, curling around the windows in delicate, tenacious spirals. Smoke did not rise from a chimney, and yet the cottage felt alive, not abandoned. There was a pull to it, a subtle insistence that made his heart quicken. Adrian hesitated at the edge of the clearing, unsure whether he had stumbled upon a place meant for him or whether he had imagined it. Entirely every step closer brought a cascade of sensory details. The air shifted slightly, warmer and heavier, with the scent of something indescribable, a combination of old wood, wet moss, and something floral, like the faint residue of a garden long past its bloom. The light played differently here, refracted through the trees in golden shards that seemed almost tangible, brushing against his cheeks like tiny, invisible fingers. He knelt to examine a particularly brilliant leaf at his feet, the veins etched in deep amber, as though the forest itself had pressed a memory into its surface. Then, without realizing it, he was standing before the doorway, a frame of darkened oak that had been worn smooth by years of wind and rain. There was something in the doorway that called to him, a quiet insistence that made his chest tighten. It was not fear that held him back, nor was it hesitation. It was curiosity in its purest form, that rare impulse that exists when the world feels bigger than your understanding and you are ready to step into a story not yet written. Adrian reached for the handle, rough and cold beneath his fingers, and felt a shiver run down his spine as he pushed it open. The hinges groaned softly, a sound that seemed to echo with the weight of time itself. And as he stepped across the threshold, the forest seemed to exhale, leaves swirling around his boots in a miniature cyclone, as though acknowledging his passage. The interior of the cottage was nothing like the outside had promised. It was intimate, almost impossibly small, with low ceilings and walls lined with shelves of objects whose purposes were not immediately clear. There were jars filled with powders that gleamed faintly in the soft light, stacks of books with cracked spines and yellowed pages, and strange instruments whose use Adrian could not name. The air smelled faintly of herbs and something more elusive, a subtle warmth that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen, but also something unfamiliar, something that seemed to belong to another time. A window on the far side caught the sun just so, spilling a rectangle of golden light across the floorboards. Dust motes danced lazily in the air, and Adrian felt as if he were not merely looking at them, but seeing them for the first time, noticing their delicate, transient patterns as they hung in the sunbeam. He moved further inside, guided less by logic than by an invisible thread of intuition. Each step creaked the old wooden floor beneath him, each creak sounding like a whisper. There was a hearth at the end of the room, cold and empty, but a few logs were stacked beside it, neatly arranged as though someone had paused mid-task and intended to return. The walls were covered with paintings and sketches, some so finely detailed that he thought they might be windows into other worlds. There were landscapes that mirrored the forest outside, skies in shades of lilac and gold and small, intimate scenes of people he did not know, their faces frozen in expressions both tender and mysterious. Adrian's gaze lingered on each one, captivated by the way light and shadow played across the brushstrokes, and a sense of calm began to settle over him, as if the cottage itself were breathing alongside him. A soft sound made him start, a rustle behind him that was not the wind. He turned quickly, half expecting to see another person, but the room was empty. The sound came again, quieter this time, almost melodic. Adrian followed it instinctively, stepping over a faded rug and around a small table cluttered with dried flowers and curious trinkets. It led him to a door, smaller than the main entrance, with a brass knob that had dulled with age. His hand trembled slightly as he touched it, feeling a warmth radiating from the wood that was incongruous with the chilly air outside. He turned the knob and pushed the door open. Inside was a smaller room, intimate and glowing in the soft light filtering from a narrow window. The walls were lined with more books and a few low shelves holding crystals that caught the light in iridescent patterns. In the center of the room was a simple chair and a desk, cluttered with papers covered in handwriting that seemed hurried yet deliberate. A single candle burned in a holder on the desk, though Adrian was certain that no one had entered before him. The flame danced as if acknowledging his presence, casting shadows that played along the walls in slow, gentle movements. He stepped closer, drawn by the flame, and felt a strange warmth pool in his chest, a sense of recognition that he could not place. He ran his fingers lightly over the papers, noting the careful loops of the script, the way the letters seemed to rise and fall like gentle waves. Some pages were filled with sketches, leaves, birds, small animals, and strange symbols that made no immediate sense. Yet there was a rhythm to them, a kind of language that seemed to pulse faintly beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. Adrian felt a tug at the edges of his memory, as though he had seen these symbols somewhere before, though he could not recall when or where. He sensed that the cottage itself was alive, not in the way that people are alive, but in the quiet, measured way of something that has always existed and will continue to exist, regardless of time or circumstance. He looked back toward the doorway he had entered through and realized that the forest outside had changed. The trees seemed denser, the light dimmer, yet the air felt warmer somehow, as if the cottage had breathed life into the clearing. Adrian could hear the faint murmur of leaves, the soft sigh of wind, and somewhere beyond the walls, a bird sang a single clear note. He realized that though he had stumbled here by accident, this place had been waiting for him. In the same way that a dream waits for the sleeper, a sudden draft brushed his cheek, carrying with it the scent of cinnamon and smoke. Adrian turned, half expecting to see a visitor, but the room remained empty. Yet the sensation lingered, as though a presence had acknowledged him. He moved to the window and looked out. The forest stretched endlessly, golden and alive, yet somehow transformed, more vivid than he had ever seen it. Leaves floated lazily in the air, caught in gentle eddies of wind that seemed to move with intention. He realized that stepping into the cottage had changed him, shifted his perception, and he felt a thrill of anticipation that he could not name. The longer he stayed, the more he noticed details he had overlooked at first. Tiny cracks in the floorboards formed intricate patterns, almost like miniature maps. The wood of the walls had textures that suggested stories, histories, and memories pressed into the grain. Even the air seemed to carry fragments of laughter, soft and unplaceable, as if the cottage had been witness to countless lives, each leaving an echo behind. Adrian felt a pull toward the desk again, drawn to a small, unassuming book whose cover was worn soft with age. He opened it carefully, reverently, and found that the pages were blank. Yet they seemed to shimmer faintly in the light, as though they held potential rather than emptiness, a promise that he could fill them with stories yet untold. A feeling of quiet awe settled over him. He realized that the cottage was not merely a place to be observed, but a place to inhabit, a space where imagination and memory intertwine. He wandered slowly, touching objects, examining sketches, and inhaling the subtle fragrances that lingered in the air. It was a sanctuary, a repository of whispers, and he understood instinctively that he had been brought here for a purpose he did not yet comprehend. Time seemed to move differently within these walls, slower and more deliberate, and he felt himself settling into its rhythm, listening, learning, absorbing. As the afternoon waned, shadows lengthening across the floor, Adrian reluctantly approached the doorway once more. He paused, looking back over his shoulder at the cottage, and felt a strange blend of anticipation and reverence. It was a beginning, he realized, a doorway not only in the physical sense, but in every sense that mattered. Stepping back outside, he noticed that the forest seemed unchanged to the casual eye, yet to him, Every leaf, every shaft of light, every whisper of wind carried a new significance. He knew he would return, that this place would call to him again and again, and that each visit would reveal something new, something vital. With one last glance, Adrian stepped fully into the clearing, letting the autumn leaves swirl around him like an offering. He walked slowly back toward the path he had wandered, feeling the weight of wonder in his chest, and the promise of the unknown stretching ahead. Somewhere deep in the heart of the forest, the cottage waited, patient and knowing, ready to welcome him again when he was ready to return. And for the first time in a long while, Adrian felt a deep and undeniable certainty that he had found a place that was, in its quiet and secretive way, home. The winter window. The first snow came softly, almost hesitantly, like a shy visitor peeking into the forest. Adrian woke to a world transformed. The amber leaves that had carpeted the forest floor were now hidden beneath a pristine layer of white, each branch holding tiny tufts of powder that shimmered in the weak morning sun. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through the skeletal limbs of trees and the distant murmur of a brook struggling beneath the ice. Every step he took crunched sharply, the sound startlingly loud in the quiet, yet somehow comforting, as though the forest itself approved of his presence. Adrian's boots sank slightly into the fresh snow as he made his way to the cottage. He could see its silhouette through the trees, smoke curling faintly from the chimney, though he knew it had not burned in days or perhaps weeks. The warmth seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves, a subtle pulse that drew him closer, an invisible invitation he could not resist. The door, familiar now, greeted him as an old friend. The wood was cold beneath his fingers, but as he stepped inside, the air changed immediately. It was warmer here, the chill of the snow replaced by a comforting, almost tangible heat that wrapped around him like a blanket. The cottage was quiet, yet alive in ways that were difficult to describe. Dust motes drifted lazily in the pale sunlight that slipped through the frost-framed windows, catching on the edges of the furniture and glinting like tiny stars frozen in air. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, flames dancing in golden arcs and sending ribbons of warmth. Adrian approached it slowly, as if he feared disturbing something sacred, and settled onto the rug in front of the hearth. His knees were pulled close to his chest, and he felt the comforting press of the wooden floor beneath him, solid and reassuring. Outside, the world was buried under snow, but here, within the cottage, he was suspended in a bubble of time, a cocoon of quiet warmth and soft light. He reached out a hand toward the window, brushing the frost that had patterned the glass like intricate lace. Each delicate tendril seemed alive, a frozen story painted in silver, and Adrian traced them lightly with his fingertips, marveling at the complexity of nature captured in ice. He leaned closer, pressing his nose against the cool glass, and for a moment He could almost feel the forest beyond the snow, the hidden life of animals beneath the white blanket, the slow pulse of trees waiting beneath their frozen branches. The world outside seemed distant, serene, and perfectly still, while inside he felt a gentle thrum of life in every corner of the cottage. Time passed differently here. Minutes stretched, becoming hours, yet Adrian was unaware of their movement. The fire shifted, its glow expanding and contracting, shadows dancing along the walls as if in quiet celebration of his presence. He studied the shelves lining the walls, taking note of the small jars and bottles that had gone unnoticed before, their contents glowing faintly in the firelight. Some held powders that glittered like crushed gemstones, others liquids that swirled in impossible patterns when the light hit them just so. The books were familiar yet mysterious, their spines lined with lettering that seemed almost to shift when viewed from the corner of his eye. Each object felt purposeful, as though the cottage itself were alive, observing and responding to him with patient attentiveness. A sudden creak from above made him start, and he looked up, half expecting someone or something to be moving in the attic. But the room remained empty, and the sound faded into the quiet hiss of the fire. Yet the sensation lingered, a gentle awareness that he was not entirely alone. The cottage had a presence, a consciousness that was subtle but undeniable, wrapping around him with warmth and quiet reassurance. He leaned back on his hands, letting his gaze drift to the ceiling, noting the beams darkened by age, the small cracks that seemed to trace constellations across the wood. Somewhere deep in his chest, a feeling began to stir, a mixture of wonder, belonging, and a growing certainty that this place was extraordinary in ways he had yet to comprehend. He returned his attention to the window, watching the snow swirl in lazy spirals outside. The world was hushed, and in that hush, Adrian felt the cadence of time itself. Every flake seemed deliberate, each one a quiet note in a symphony too subtle for most to hear. He imagined the stories the snow might carry, tales from distant mountains, whispers from creatures of the forest, memories of days long past. It was easy here to believe that the cottage existed in its own rhythm, a sanctuary from the world, a place where stories lived and waited patiently for someone to notice them. Adrian's thoughts drifted to the forest beyond. He wondered which animals might be seeking shelter beneath the snow, how the birds balanced delicately on frozen branches, and how the trees bore their icy burdens without complaint. In the stillness, he imagined the lives of those unseen creatures, their hidden movements and quiet struggles, and he felt a profound connection to the unseen world. The frost on the window pane became more than decoration. It was a lens through which he glimpsed a deeper reality, one that demanded attention and care, one that thrived quietly beyond human sight. The room itself seemed to respond to his attention. The fire crackled more brightly, as though celebrating his engagement, and the shadows shifted, molding into shapes that suggested movement yet remained intangible. Adrian noticed, for the first time, a small wooden table tucked near the hearth, almost hidden in the flickering light. Upon it lay a small bundle of cloth, tied with a ribbon of deep blue, and beside it, a single key glinted faintly in the firelight. He approached cautiously, his curiosity outweighing any hesitation. The bundle felt familiar, though he had never seen it before. He untied the ribbon and unfolded the cloth, revealing a small, hand-carved figure of a girl, delicate and detailed, as if carved by someone who understood the contours of life intimately. Its eyes, though crafted from wood, seemed almost alive, reflecting the firelight in tiny, glimmering points. Adrian's fingers lingered on the figure, tracing its delicate features. He felt an odd sense of recognition, a pull that was impossible to ignore. It was as though the cottage itself had presented him with a companion, a presence to share its quiet wonders. For a long while, he simply held the figure, feeling warmth spread through him, a gentle assurance that he was not alone in this hidden place. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thick and endless, but inside, the cottage hummed with life and possibility. Hours passed, unnoticed. Adrian explored further, moving carefully from shelf to shelf, examining the intricate patterns carved into the wood of the walls, noticing small details he had overlooked before, scratches in the floor that formed unintentional maps, faded stains on the rug that suggested past meals or crafts, and faint outlines of objects long removed but leaving only the memory of their shape behind. Every corner of the cottage seemed to whisper secrets, waiting for him to lean in and listen. Occasionally, he would pause, glancing toward the window as frost advanced across the glass in delicate lacework, feeling the intimacy of the room contrasted against the vast silence beyond. He returned to the fire, the wooden figure of the girl now seated beside him on the rug, as though she were a real companion sharing in his wonder. Adrian spoke softly, telling her about the forest, the snow, the hidden animals he imagined wandering beneath the white cover. It felt strange at first, talking to something so small and inanimate, yet comforting, as if the cottage itself approved, filling the room with an unspoken warmth. He imagined the figure listening, nodding gently in the flickering glow, and the silence between them became something shared, not empty. Outside, the snow began to settle, layers building upon layers, transforming the familiar paths and clearings into a dreamlike expanse. Inside, the cottage seemed to respond, the warmth intensifying slightly. The fire's glow deepening, shadows stretching lazily toward the corners. Adrian closed his eyes, listening to the subtle symphony of crackling flames, shifting shadows, and the faint murmur of the wind through the trees beyond. He felt a deep sense of peace, a rare and profound stillness that seeped into his bones. When he finally opened his eyes, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long beams through the frost-laced window. The cottage glowed in the dying light, golden and tender, every detail highlighted as if painted by the hands of a careful artist. Adrian realized, with a thrill, that this was a place where he could lose himself and still feel found. Every sound, every movement, every delicate pattern in frost and dust and firelight mattered, and in that realization, he felt an almost holy reverence. The snow outside no longer seemed like a barrier, but a protective blanket, isolating this small universe, allowing it to exist without interference, purely and perfectly. Adrian leaned back, holding the figure close to his chest, feeling its small weight and imagining a gentle heartbeat within. He understood that winter had transformed the forest, but it had also transformed him, sharpening his awareness, deepening his appreciation for quiet beauty, and teaching him the subtle rhythms of life that often go unnoticed. The cottage was no longer merely a shelter. It was a living companion, a place where imagination, memory, and wonder intertwine. And in that quiet hush of winter, Adrian felt the rare, exquisite joy of being utterly present, of being home in a place that had always been waiting for him, patient and knowing. As the evening deepened, the fire crackled its final song, and Adrian drifted into a contemplative silence, listening to the soft hiss of the settling snow and the gentle whispers of the cottage around him. For the first time, he felt entirely at peace, aware that the winter window, the frost, the warmth, and even the small carved figure beside him were all part of a delicate, interconnected whole story unfolding quietly in the hush of snow and firelight, waiting for him to continue discovering it. The spring staircase. Adrian had not noticed the staircase before, hidden in the corner of the cottage where shadows pooled and dust lay thick upon the floorboards. But spring, he realized as he explored, had a way of revealing what winter had kept secret. Sunlight streamed through a small, narrow window at the base of the stairs, catching motes of dust that danced lazily in the air. The wooden steps, worn smooth by years of quiet passage, now gleamed with a freshness, as though the house itself had breathed in the new season. Delicate tendrils of green had begun to climb the banister, curling around it with a gentle persistence, dotted with tiny blossoms in soft shades of rose, lavender, and pale gold. The scent was subtle, but undeniably mixture of fresh rain, warm earth, and the sweet perfume of budding flowers. Adrian's hand brushed along the vines as he began to climb, each touch leaving a faint, tingling warmth along his fingers. The banister seemed alive, responding to his movement with subtle shifts, guiding him upward. Every creak of the wooden steps beneath his boots was musical, resonating like laughter echoing through the quiet rooms, a joyful sound that seemed to celebrate the arrival of spring. The stairwell itself seemed to stretch taller than it had before, the ceiling rising just slightly, as if the cottage expanded with the season, welcoming him to new heights. From above came the faint patter of rain against the windows, a gentle rhythm that blended with the chorus of birds outside. Adrian paused mid-step, pressing a hand against the smooth wood and listening. The sound of life beyond the walls, the rain tapping on leaves, birds calling to one another. The low hum of the forest awakening wove together into a soft symphony that seemed to flow through him. His chest lifted with a curious warmth, a feeling that stretched beyond mere comfort, hope, subtle but insistent, flowering inside him like the buds climbing the banister. He continued upward, slowly, savoring each movement. The cottage responded in kind. The wooden floor beneath his feet emitted warm, welcoming vibrations. The walls seemed to breathe with him, and the vines on the banister curled a little higher, blossoms opening as if acknowledging his presence. Sunlight shifted through the windows, painting the staircase in shifting mosaics of green and gold. Every step felt deliberate, a small ritual of passage that marked his own journey as much as the seasons. The air smelled faintly of honey and wet leaves, a reminder that life beyond the cottage was returning after its winter slumber, delicate and unstoppable. Halfway up, Adrian glanced through the nearest window. Outside, the forest had transformed completely from the frozen stillness of winter. Raindrops fell from the branches in sparkling strings, dripping into puddles that rippled with tiny waves. Birds moved from tree to tree, their wings catching the light in flashes of iridescent color, singing with a vibrancy that made the air seem to shimmer. He watched a small fox pause beneath a sheltering tree, its coat glistening with wetness, ears twitching as it listened to the soft symphony of rain and song. It looked directly at him for a brief instant, as if acknowledging his presence, before bounding gracefully into the undergrowth. Adrian felt a thrill of connection, a sense that life in all its forms, the hidden, the fleeting, the overlooked, was intimately bound to his own journey within the cottage. The staircase curved gently, spiraling upward with a quiet elegance. Adrian noticed small details he had never seen before. Tiny carvings etched into the wood of the steps, delicate symbols that seemed to tell stories if one looked long enough. Scratches and indentations left by unknown hands, now softened by the touch of time. And in the corners where the sunlight hit, faint glimmers that looked almost like traces of magic, shimmering in response to his presence. He felt as though the cottage were revealing itself to him piece by piece, and he realized with a quiet thrill that he had become part of its unfolding story. As he climbed, he began to hear faint, unexpected sounds. A whisper, almost imperceptible, seemed to come from the staircase itself. It was not a voice, exactly, but a gentle rhythm, a cadence that felt like breathing or heartbeat, synchronized with the creak of the steps. Adrian paused, listening, and a warm shiver ran down his spine. The cottage was alive in ways he had never imagined, not merely walls and floors, but a living presence that acknowledged him, celebrated him, and guided him gently upward. It was a subtle, unspoken conversation, one that did not require words, yet filled him with a profound sense of belonging. Near the top of the staircase, a sudden breeze brushed past him, carrying the scent of wildflowers from somewhere unseen. The blossoms on the banister trembled lightly, petals brushing against his skin like delicate fingers. He realized that the cottage, the staircase, even the smallest detail, the curve of a step, the shimmer of sunlight on a leaf outside, was attuned to him. The feeling was almost dizzying in its intimacy, as though he were part of an intricate, living tapestry, and each thread vibrated with life when he moved through it. Finally, he reached the landing, where the staircase opened into a small, sunlit room he had not explored before. The walls were pale, almost golden in the afternoon light, and shelves lined the edges, filled with jars, books, and trinkets whose purposes he could only guess. The floor was smooth and polished, catching the sunlight in gentle reflections. In the center of the room, a wide window framed the forest beyond, now fully alive in spring's embrace. Rain continued to fall softly, sparkling in the sunlight, and birds darted between branches with joyous energy. The air in the room was fragrant with blossoms, clean wood, and the faintest trace of earth, creating a sensory harmony that made Adrian's chest ache with beauty. Adrian approached the window and pressed his palms against the cool glass. The frost that had lingered in winter was gone, replaced by droplets of rain that traced tiny, fleeting patterns as they ran down the pane. He watched the drops merge and divide, each movement reflecting the shifting light outside, and felt a gentle thrill in the simplicity of it all. The outside world was alive, urgent yet peaceful, chaotic yet harmonious, and Adrian's heart seemed to echo its rhythm. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a quiet understanding began to bloom. The cottage was a mirror, a teacher, and a companion all at once. It guided him through the seasons. Each step along the staircase, a lesson in noticing, in feeling, in becoming fully awake to the subtle beauty of the world. He turned from the window and wandered further into the room. A small desk stood beneath a shelf, strewn with sketches of flowers, leaves, and birds. Some were detailed and lifelike, others abstract, yet all vibrated with energy. On the desk lay a notebook, its pages open and blank, yet shimmered faintly as though inviting him to write, to draw, to create. Adrian felt the same magnetic pull he had felt with the carved figure last winter, a delicate insistence that he could leave his mark here, participate in the ongoing story of the cottage. He reached for a pencil, holding it tentatively above the paper, and felt a thrill of possibility, as though the notebook were alive, ready to record more than incredi, to hold memory, imagination, and dreams. A sudden sound made him glance toward the doorway. It was soft, almost hesitant, a shuffle, a whisper of movement, as if someone else were present. Adrian's heart leaped. He had never met anyone here, yet the cottage had never truly felt empty, and now, for the first time, it seemed as though it had invited another presence. From the doorway stepped a girl, delicate and ethereal, with hair the color of twilight and eyes that mirrored the green of budding leaves. She moved with a quiet grace, her gaze curious yet unafraid, as if she had known this place all her life. In her hands, she carried a small basket of blossoms, petals spilling like sunshine with each careful step. "Hello," she said softly, her voice like the murmur of leaves in a spring breeze. Adrian blinked, unsure if he should respond. Yet the cottage seemed to encourage him, the vines on the banister curling slightly toward her as she approached. "I've been waiting," she added, a mysterious smile tugging at her lips. She laid the basket on the desk, and the scent of flowers filled the room, richer than any he had smelled before. Adrian found his voice at last. "Waiting for me." The girl nodded, a hint of mischief in her expression. "This place brings people when they are ready. I think it thought you were." Her eyes flickered toward the window, where raindrops caught the sunlight in tiny prisms. "Come with me. There's more to see." Together, they turned toward the staircase again, now a shared path, wrapped in spring's gentle embrace. The vines glistened, petals brushing their hands as they ascended, the wooden steps singing in creaks and whispers that seemed almost like laughter. Outside, rain and birdsong wove together into a living melody, echoing the quiet joy within the cottage. Adrian felt his heart lift, hope blooming like the blossoms on the banister, and realized that spring had brought more than warmth, it had brought companionship, the beginning of a story that would unfold across seasons, each step carrying him deeper into wonder above. The room awaited, filled with sunlight, blossoms, and the faint hum of magic, ready to reveal the next secret of the cottage. And Adrian, for the first time, understood the truth he had felt in his bones. This place, hidden yet eternal, was not merely a shelter. It was a living world, waiting patiently for those willing to notice, to climb, to listen, and to grow. The summer garden. Summer arrived quietly, unhurried, yet with a presence that seemed almost tangible in the air. Adrian woke to the scent of warm earth and the gentle hum of life that had returned to the forest in full force. Sunlight streamed through the cottage windows in thick golden beams, highlighting the dust motes that floated lazily, turning them into tiny floating stars. The fire in the hearth was long extinguished, unnecessary in this season, yet the warmth of the sunlight was sufficient, spilling across the wooden floorboards and warming his shoulders as he rose. There was a stillness here, yes, but it was alive with gentle motion, a rhythm that seemed to pulse through the cottage walls and into him. He stepped outside, the door creaking softly behind him, and immediately felt the shift that summer brought. The forest beyond the clearing had transformed into a riot of color and sound. Leaves shimmered in shades of green that seemed almost too vivid to be real, and wildflowers erupted along the forest edge, delicate petals swaying in the gentle breeze. Birds moved through the branches, darting and calling in a joyful chorus, while insects hummed quietly around clusters of blooms. It was a world brimming with life, and yet, despite its abundance, there was a sense of serenity, a balance that spoke of order and patience. Adrian's boots sank slightly into the soft earth at the doorstep, and he felt a thrill of belonging in the simplicity of that contact with the soil. The garden at the front of the cottage had transformed entirely since spring. The vines that had climbed the banister were now thick with leaves and small buds, some opening into radiant blossoms of gold and crimson. Wildflowers spilled across the doorstep, brushing against the edges of the cottage as if to welcome him. Adrian bent down instinctively, brushing his fingers over the soft petals, feeling their delicate texture, and inhaled the fragrance that was faintly sweet with hints of honey and grass. He realized, with a sudden and profound sense of clarity, that he had never before felt this kind of attachment to any place. The garden, the cottage, the forest, they were no longer distant or merely observed. They were his, not in possession perhaps, but in acknowledgement, in the quiet understanding that this sanctuary had chosen him as surely as he had chosen to be here. He set about tending the wildflowers, careful not to disturb their natural rhythm. He knelt in the soft earth, brushing back the weeds that threatened to crowd out the blossoms, and marveled at the sheer resilience of the plants. Some had been battered by spring rains, their stems bent or leaves torn, yet they still reached skyward, striving for sunlight. Others were new arrivals, seedlings he had not noticed before, delicate and tentative in their emergence. Adrian felt a kinship with them, a shared tenacity in the face of the unknown. As he worked, bees drifted lazily around him, humming a slow, warm tune, landing briefly on flowers before moving on, their tiny bodies dusted with pollen. He watched them carefully, fascinated by the precision of their movements and the rhythm of their small, vital lives. The sun climbed higher, warming his shoulders and casting long, dappled shadows across the garden. He paused occasionally, leaning on his hands to catch his breath and simply take in the scene. The cottage behind him was framed by a tapestry of flowers, vines climbing the walls and windowsills, each bloom catching the light differently, shifting from gold to orange to soft rose, depending on the angle. It was alive in a way that felt conscious, as if the garden itself were aware of his presence and delighted in his attention. He felt no intrusion here, no need to command or direct. The cottage and garden thrived in harmony with him, and he with them. He noticed a small stone path winding through the garden, partially hidden by overgrown blooms. Curiosity led him along it, stepping carefully over roots and petals, feeling the uneven stones beneath his feet. Along the path, more flowers, weighted clusters of lavender, sprays of wild daisies, and delicate bluebells swaying in the gentle summer wind. A small fountain stood at the center of a clearing, its water shimmering with sunlight, droplets sparkling as they fell in soft arcs. The sound was faint but perfect, a gentle murmur that seemed to blend with the hum of bees and the occasional chirp of a bird, creating a quiet symphony that filled the air with serenity. Adrian sat by the fountain for a while, watching the water move, mesmerized by its unceasing flow. As he rested, he realized that he had never experienced this kind of connection to a place. He had wandered many forests, explored countless paths, yet none had felt like this. The cottage and garden had drawn him in silently, welcomed him without expectation, and in doing so, had made him part of something larger, a quiet story that was both ancient and immediate. Each petal he touched, each stone he stepped upon, each beam of sunlight that warmed his skin felt imbued with significance. He felt alive in a way that was different from mere observation. It was participation, engagement, and understanding all at once. The girl he had encountered in spring appeared then, stepping lightly from behind a clump of tall foxgloves. She moved gracefully, carrying a basket of seeds, her eyes bright and curious, mirroring the greens and golds of the garden. "You've done well," she said, her voice soft yet filled with warmth. "The flowers respond to care, and you've learned to listen." Adrian blinked, surprised that she had appeared so suddenly, yet he did not startle. Her presence was natural here, as if she belonged as much as the vines, the blossoms, and the sunlight together. they wandered through the garden, tending to the flowers and sowing seeds in the small patches of bare earth. Adrian watched as she moved, noting the careful precision in her actions, the ease with which she seemed to understand the rhythms of growth. She paused beside a cluster of marigolds, lightly brushing a petal with her fingers and whispering something he could not understand. Yet the flower seemed to respond, leaning slightly toward her hand. Adrian felt a flicker of wonder, realizing that there was something more here than just nature and nurture, that the cottage, the garden, and perhaps even she were infused with a subtle, unseen energy. Hours passed unnoticed in the blissful rhythm of labor and observation. The sun dipped lower, spilling warmer, more honeyed light across the garden. Shadows lengthened, weaving intricate patterns across the flowers, and the air was rich with the scent of blossoms and the faint, warm perfume of the earth itself. Adrian paused to breathe, noticing the subtle movements of the bees, the gentle sway of petals in the breeze, and the tiny, almost imperceptible creatures crawling along the soil. Life, in all its forms, was present, vibrant, and delicate, yet persistent, and Adrian felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for being allowed to witness it, to be part of its quiet unfolding. At the edge of the garden, the forest stretched beyond, promising more adventures, more secrets to uncover. Yet Adrian did not feel the need to rush beyond this moment. The cottage and its summer garden were enough, whole in their completeness, offering a sanctuary that balanced stillness with gentle motion. For the first time in his wandering life, he felt rooted, held, chosen. The garden had claimed him in a subtle, undeniable way, and he welcomed it with open arms. As the afternoon faded into evening, golden sunlight softened into the warm blush of dusk. Fireflies began to appear, floating in lazy arcs above the blossoms, their faint glows adding an ethereal layer to the already magical scene. Adrian sat on the doorstep, watching them drift among the flowers, feeling their gentle light mingle with the remaining sunbeams. The girl beside him, now named Vespera, leaned against the wooden frame, her presence calm and comforting. Together, they watched the garden, the cottage, and the forest beyond, a quiet understanding passing between them. This was home, this was belonging, and this story, like the seasons themselves, would continue to unfold in its own perfect rhythm. When night fully settled over the forest, the garden glimmered faintly in the moonlight, petals shining with dew. The faint hum of bees replaced by the chirp of crickets and the soft whisper of leaves. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the day, the scent of flowers, and the quiet companionship of Vespera seep into him. He realized that the cottage had not only given him shelter, had given him roots, a place to grow alongside the seasons, a sanctuary where life, beauty, and care were inseparable. For the first time, he understood the profound truth that belonging is not found in wandering, but in being chosen, in participating in the quiet rhythms of a world that knows you, and in returning that knowledge with care. The summer garden had opened itself fully to him, and Adrian, kneeling among the blooms, felt the steady, joyful pulse of life resonate through his heart. The cottage, the forest, Vespera, and the flowers were all threads woven into a tapestry of existence, each element inseparable from the others, each movement and color, scent and sound, a note in the symphony of belonging. And as the stars began to twinkle above, reflected faintly in the dew-dappled petals, Adrian smiled, feeling the full weight and wonder of a home that had chosen him long before he realized he was ready. The keeper of seasons. The attic staircase creaked softly beneath Adrian's boots as he ascended, sunlight fading behind him and shadows stretching long across the cottage walls. Summer had painted the rooms below in warmth and gold. Yet the attic seemed to exist in a space outside the seasons, timeless and hushed, a threshold to secrets waiting patiently for discovery. Dust motes floated in the narrow slits of sunlight that filtered through small, round windows, and each step Adrian took stirred them into a gentle dance, shimmering faintly like stars suspended in amber light. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood, faintly sweet with memory, and he felt a flutter of anticipation deep within his chest at the top of the staircase. The attic opened into a wide, sloping room filled with objects that seemed collected over lifetimes. Wooden trunks lined the walls, worn and cracked, but still sturdy. Delicate glass bottles, some empty, others holding powders or liquids that caught the light in colors he could not name, and bundles of dried herbs, flowers, and vines tied carefully with string. The floorboards were uneven, some warped slightly by age, yet the room felt steadfast, held together by an invisible hand that had tended it for decades. Adrian's eyes drifted from object to object, lingering on details, the etchings on a wooden chest, the delicate carvings in the frame of a mirror, the faint patterns pressed into the floor where sunlight had shifted. Through the years, near the center of the room stood an old wooden table, its surface worn smooth by long use. On it lay a leather-bound journal, the cover etched with faint symbols he recognized only as familiar shapes from the garden and staircase leaves, blossoms and spirals that mimicked the swirl of water and wind. The journal seemed to pulse with quiet energy, as though it had been waiting, breathing, ready to share its story. Adrian approached it slowly, hands hovering for a moment above the cover. He felt an invisible current, a gentle tug urging him forward, and finally, with a deep breath, he opened it. The pages were filled with sketches, each more detailed and intricate than the last. Leaves of every shape and color, snowflakes frozen in perfect symmetry, blossoms caught mid-bloom, sunlight streaming through forest canopies, and stars reflected in pools of water. Adrian traced his fingers lightly over the drawings, marveling at the care and precision in each line. Interspersed among them were words, written in flowing, elegant script. He read aloud softly, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. This place is a sanctuary for the seasons, a pause between the endless turning. I, the first keeper, have tended it so that the winds may rest. The snow may lie quietly, the blossoms may unfold without rush, and the sunlight may linger longer than anywhere else. Each keeper is chosen not by merit alone, but by the heart's quiet understanding of balance, patience, and reverence for life in all its forms. Adrian's breath caught. The sketches were not merely drawings, they were records, memories, lessons. He could see winter captured in silver frost, spring in tender buds, summer in the riot of flowers and bees, and autumn in leaves tumbling gently to the ground. It was as though the cottage itself, through the first keeper, had inscribed its essence into the journal, preparing for someone who would continue the careful tending of its magic. He turned another page, and his eyes widened as he saw sketches that were not merely representations of nature, but maps of the cottage itself, drawn from memory and imagination. The staircases, windows, garden paths, and hidden nooks were all captured in exquisite detail, annotated with notes about sunlight at different hours, the way the wind carried scents from the forest, and even the subtle rhythms of the fire in the hearth. There were instructions, almost like gentle guidance, where to plant, when to water, how to observe without disturbing, how to listen. Each line spoke of reverence, patience, and understanding, teaching Adrian how to care for this place in ways he had not yet imagined. Vespera's presence appeared then, quiet but unmistakable, a soft step behind him. She leaned on the edge of the table, her eyes bright with curiosity and understanding. "You found it," she said softly. "The journal always waits for the next keeper. It knows who will be ready." Adrian's hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages, and he asked, Does this mean I'm—" "Yes," Vespera said, a small smile lighting her face. "The cottage has chosen you. Every keeper before you has done their work with patience, tending to each season, each corner of this home, so that the world outside can continue its turning without chaos. Now it is your turn." Adrian closed the journal briefly, the weight of realization settling over him. He thought of the winter window, the spring staircase, the summer garden, and the golden autumn doorway. Each season had unfolded before him with care, inviting him to notice, to participate, and to understand. And now he understood why the cottage had called him, why it had waited silently in the forest for a boy with watchful eyes, a patient heart, and an open mind. He was the keeper it had been waiting for. The air in the attic seemed to shift then, as if acknowledging his acceptance. Dust motes shimmered in the sunlight, lifting higher into the space, caught in currents that seemed alive. A faint breeze stirred, moving through the open window and carrying with it the scents of garden blooms, wet earth, and distant snow-capped mountains he had never seen but could imagine. Adrian felt the pulse of the cottage around him, subtle and steady, a heartbeat in rhythm with the life he had observed and nurtured in each season. He returned to the sketches, studying the intricate details of snowflakes and leaves, blossoms, and sunlight, the quiet magic of being present. Adrian realized that being the keeper would not be a task of dominion or control. It would be a practice of observation, care, and reverence. It would mean noticing the small, often overlooked details, tending to the subtle rhythms of the world, and learning the patience to allow life to unfold in its own time. He spent hours in the attic, tracing lines with his fingers, reading passages aloud, and imagining himself walking through each season, observing, tending, listening. Vespera moved quietly beside him, occasionally pointing out details in the sketches that he had missed, explaining the significance of a certain blossom's tilt, or the way a ray of sunlight hit the hearth at noon. Adrian felt a growing sense of wonder and also responsibility. The cottage had given him sanctuary, magic, and the quiet knowledge of its purpose. In return, it asked for care, attention, and understanding as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the attic walls in warm amber light. Adrian closed the journal with a deep breath. He knew the task ahead would be delicate and continuous. Each season, each day, each hour would carry lessons, but the weight of the responsibility did not feel like burden. It felt like belonging. For the first time, he felt entirely at home, chosen by a place that had waited patiently for him to arrive, and ready to continue its story. Vespera leaned lightly on his shoulder. The seasons will come to you, just as they have to every keeper, she said softly. Sometimes they bring joy, sometimes challenge, but they are always patient, always waiting, and now you are part of their rhythm. Adrian nodded, looking out the small attic window at the forest beyond. He imagined the leaves of autumn turning, the winter snow settling silently, the first buds of spring unfurling, and the summer blooms spilling in color and scent. He realized that he would walk through these cycles not as a visitor, but as a guardian, a witness, and a participant in a rhythm older than any story he had ever known. Each season would be a teacher, each flower and flake and beam of sunlight a lesson in care, patience, and wonder. For the first time, Adrian felt the full breadth of his purpose. The cottage had not only chosen him, it had prepared him, taught him through the subtle unfolding of its rooms, staircases, windows, and garden. And now, standing in the quiet sanctity of the attic, he understood that the story was no longer just the cottage's. It was his, theirs, and every moment of the seasons yet to come. He ran a hand over the journal's cover one last time, feeling the subtle warmth that seemed to emanate from it, a quiet reassurance. The attic, the staircase, the garden, the cottage itself, they were not just spaces. They were alive, attentive, and intertwined with him now. He had been called, and he had answered. The keeper of seasons had been chosen, and the story, delicate and enduring, was ready to continue. As the twilight deepened, Adrian placed the journal carefully on the table, its pages open to sketches of the next season yet to come. He looked out the attic window one last time, breathing in the scents and sights of the forest and garden below, and felt the rhythm of the cottage pulse in tandem with his heartbeat. The responsibility, the magic, the quiet joy, all converged in that single moment, and Adrian knew with certainty that he had finally found the place where he belonged. The seasons waited patiently outside, and inside, the cottage hummed softly with approval. Adrian, keeper of seasons, would walk with them, tend them, and learn from them, carrying forward the legacy of all who had come before him. The story was endless, cyclical, and beautiful, and now he was part of it. The eternal sleep twilight settled over the forest like a soft, silken veil, the golden warmth of day fading into the muted blues and purples of evening. The cottage, once radiant in the glow of summer sun, seemed to exhale, letting go of the day and welcoming the approach of night. The air around it shimmered with a gentle mist, curling through the garden, slipping between the vines on the banister and weaving across the forest floor. Adrian stood at the threshold, the journal cradled in his hands, feeling the delicate pulse of the cottage beneath his feet, as if it were a heart beating in tandem with his own. He inhaled the scent of twilight, cooling flowers, faint smoke of last night's hearth, and the subtle perfume of rain lingering in the air. Everything seemed to slow. The forest paused, holding its breath, while the wind whispered softly through the branches, stirring leaves in a tender, deliberate rhythm. Even the fireflies had bent their quiet dance, flickering in patterns that mirrored the stars slowly emerging in the sky above. It was a moment suspended between time and eternity, and Adrian felt himself part of it, neither separate nor lost, but fully present. The cottage itself seemed to breathe. The wooden beams shivered faintly in the cool air, the windows glimmered with reflected starlight, and the vines on the staircase leaned slightly toward him, as if acknowledging his understanding. Adrian felt no fear, no urgency, only a profound serenity, the kind that comes when one finally comprehends a truth that had always been waiting just beyond the edge of perception. He was not merely a visitor in this house of seasons. He was its keeper. He belonged to its rhythm, and its rhythm belonged to him. The journal in his hands felt heavier now, not with weight of leather and paper, but with significance. It contained the stories of those who had come before, sketches and words that captured moments of winter frost, spring blossoms, summer warmth, and autumn's golden descent. Each page was a map of care and attention, a record of the delicate balance between action and observation, of tending without interference. As Adrian turned the pages, he noticed that the illustrations seemed to shimmer faintly in the dimming light, leaves curling imperceptibly, snowflakes glinting with tiny prisms, and petals opening just enough to catch the last rays of sun. The cottage itself seemed to acknowledge his reading, responding to the touch of his fingers on the familiar lines and drawings. He stepped into the garden once more, where summer's blooms now glowed faintly in the soft silver of twilight. Fireflies flickered among the flowers, their light gentle but persistent, mirroring the rhythm of the cottage's quiet heartbeat. Bees had retreated to hidden hives, and birds had found their roosts, yet the air vibrated with life, unseen yet palpable. The mist wound around the petals and blades of grass, curling and shifting as though alive, and Adrian moved among it with reverence. Every touch of leaf or flower, every careful step over stones and roots, felt like a conversation, a silent agreement between him and the cottage, between him and the seasons he had come to know so intimately. As darkness deepened, the attic staircase beckoned, its banister now draped with vines that glimmered faintly in the starlight. Adrian climbed slowly, each step creaking in a familiar, comforting rhythm. The cottage had grown with him, responding to his presence, anticipating his movements. Shadows pooled in corners, but they were not ominous. They were gentle and protective, holding the space for the quiet unfolding of time. He reached the attic, the journal clutched to his chest, and felt the pulse of the room in synchrony with his heartbeat. The journal lay open on the wooden table, and Adrian knelt beside it, fingers tracing the sketches of seasons in all their perfection. Snowflakes still rested on the page, as if freshly fallen, blossoms tilted toward imagined sunlight, and leaves shimmered with the memory of autumn's breeze. He understood now that his role was both active and passive. He would care for the seasons, guide them, and yet also yield, allowing them to unfold naturally, to rest when they needed rest, and to turn in their own unhurried rhythm. He was not a master of time, but a companion to it, a witness and guardian of its eternal cycle. The mist began to gather more densely, rising through the windows and curling along the beams of the attic. It wrapped around Adrian like a soft cloak, cool and comforting, and he felt the boundaries between himself and the cottage blur. He was inside and he was outside. He was human, and he was part of something far older, far wider than he had ever imagined. Each inhalation filled him with the sense of forest, garden, and hearth, while each exhalation seemed to release him from the last tether of ordinary life. The world outside continued to turn, but within the mist and walls of the cottage, time itself seemed to slow, stretching out into infinity. Vespera appeared beside him again, her form glowing faintly in the silver twilight. She did not speak, for words were unnecessary. Her presence alone carried assurance, guidance, and continuity. She gestured toward the window where the forest shimmered in layers of mist, moonlight, and shadow. Adrian understood immediately this was not an ending, but a continuation, the moment where past, present, and future coalesced into the eternal rhythm he was now part of. He rose slowly and walked toward the window, the journal cradled in his arms. Outside, the garden seemed to inhale and exhale, petals shifting imperceptibly, the soft light of fireflies blinking in cadence with the beating of some unseen heart. The forest beyond stood silent, yet alive, holding the same rhythm as the cottage. Adrian pressed his hands against the glass, feeling the cool surface beneath his palms, and in that contact he felt the pulse of time itself, unbroken, infinite, as dusk deepened into night. The cottage seemed to drift, or perhaps it was Adrian who drifted within it. The edges of walls softened, beams of light stretched and shimmered, and the mist thickened into a gentle embrace. He did not resist, for there was no need. Each step, each breath, each heartbeat aligned with the rhythm of the cottage, the seasons, and the endless turning of time. He understood fully now that belonging was not a momentary sensation, but an enduring state, a merging of self with place, rhythm, and purpose. The attic faded into twilight, the journal resting lightly against Adrian's chest. His eyelids grew heavy, yet the fatigue was not weary. It was the peace that comes with perfect understanding and acceptance. The cottage hummed softly, the fireflies danced through the mist, and the shadows of the garden moved gently in the silver light. Adrian felt the heartbeat of the seasons against his own, and the quiet assurance of those who had come before him, all keepers who had tended, watched, and rested within these walls. The first stars emerged above the forest, twinkling faintly, mirrored in the duladon petals below. Each star, each drop of dew, each fold of mist carried memory, life, and energy, and Adrian felt it all flow through him. He lay down gently upon the soft rug near the attic window, the journal open beside him, sketches of winter, spring, summer, and autumn shimmering faintly. The mist curled around him protectively, and the cottage seemed to hum a lullaby, subtle and enduring, guiding him toward rest without urgency or fear. In that moment, Adrian understood the final truth. The cottage was eternal, and so were the seasons it cradled. He did not belong to time in the ordinary sense, nor did he seek to command it. He belonged to its rhythm, its gentle, unbroken pulse, the quiet dance of snow, blossom, sunlight, and falling leaf. He was a participant, a guardian, a witness to the delicate balance of life and rest, of change and continuity. And the cottage, in return, welcomed him fully, enfolding him in its mist, its warmth, and its soft, enduring heartbeat. Sleep came gradually, as though the cottage itself exhaled in tandem with him. His breathing synchronized with the rhythm of seasons, his heartbeat echoing the pulse of earth, water, air, and light. Each page of the journal seemed to whisper faintly, carrying the voices of keepers past, murmuring encouragement, stories, and guidance. He drifted into a dreamless, perfect rest. Yet he was awake in understanding, conscious in awareness, fully part of the living, breathing world of the cottage. Outside, the mist thickened, curling through the trees and garden in soft waves. The cottage shone faintly, a beacon in the twilight, its walls grieving, its windows glimmering, its roof catching the silver light of the moon. The seasons rested within it, safe, tended, and remembered. Winter slept in silver frost, spring in budding green, summer in radiant bloom, and autumn in golden leaves that shimmered faintly in the quiet mist. And Adrian, the boy who had wandered and wondered, now keeper of seasons, rested within their eternal embrace. The night deepened, yet the cottage remained vigilant, a gentle, unbroken presence. Time continued its endless turning, yet here, within this sanctuary, it paused, allowing all that was alive and beautiful to settle into quiet perfection. Adrian lay still, the journal close, the air soft around him, and for the first time, he felt entirely, irrevocably at home. He belonged to the cottage belonged to him, and the seasons slept in their eternal rhythm, safe and unbroken, carried forever by the boy who understood their secret. Thank you for joining me tonight, here at Whispers of the Night. May Adrian's journey and the cottage's gentle rhythm stay with you, guiding you into the sweetest of dreams. If you enjoyed tonight's story, please remember to subscribe so you can return night after night to find calm, comfort, and rest. Until we meet again, may you sleep peacefully, and may your dreams be kind.